Welcome to Building Safe Workplaces, a podcast where experts dedicated to workplace health and safety review relevant industry topics. This podcast is brought to you by the Health and Safety Council.
Hello and welcome to Building Safe Workplaces, casual talk about serious matters. I'm your host, Tommy Nitt with HASC. Today we have with us a special guest from Phillips 66 in Billings, Montana, Miss Abby Lechenberger. Right? Did I say that right?
Yep, you got it.
All right, excellent. Abby, so what is your role in Billings?
So I am the safety team lead for the plant.
For the entire facility, right?
Correct.
Okay. And how long have you been with Phillips 66?
I've been with Phillips about 8 years. I just moved to Billings in August of 2021. And then I had a baby, so I was gone for a few months. Kind of started this role in December of 2021.
Okay. So are you from the local area? Have you spent your whole life in the north or?
No, not at all. This is totally new to me. I'm from Oklahoma.
Okay.
And then I actually kind of went to school in California and went to school in Indiana. And then went back to Oklahoma and got my master's. And then from there, I started at the Wood River Refinery, which is in Illinois, kind of right outside of St. Louis. And I worked there for about 7.5 years, and then got this job opportunity up here. So it's definitely a first experience.
It's a lot different than being down south, right?
Yes. And I wouldn't say Oklahoma is south. It's definitely Midwest.
So in your career, what sort of leadership challenges have you seen with Phillips 66?
So I think refining and probably oil and gas in general can lend some pretty solid challenges because you've got the work that's really happening is in the field, and then your so-called leadership, so basically your management, they're less field-based. Right. So oftentimes it's that disconnect between the people in the field, their messages getting up to management understanding their messages, and being able to provide solutions back to them. So my experience would be mainly the road between the two, the pathway, not being really open, not being sound and available.
And in your career, have you seen that gap widening, or are we trending in the right direction? Are we closing that gap? What have you seen in the last few years?
I definitely think that we're closing that gap more than widening. So yeah, to some people, 8 years might be a solid amount of time. I feel like I'm surrounded by people that have 20 plus years of experience, so I often still kind of see myself as green in this industry. Previously, I was a professional ballet dancer, so this is all new to me. But from the management standpoint, I think that managers are recognizing that people are human. They want to perform well. They want to do a good job. They're not trying to be negative. They're not trying to do bad things. And I think that the management has become very compassionate, very empathetic, and they're wanting to have a good workplace instead of maybe the old mentality of just shut up and get it done. I don't want to hear about it. Just do your work. It's more of hey, I remember your name. I know that you have 3 kids, and I know that you like the Saints for football. So it's a very open, more of a team family type mentality that I feel like leaders are starting to move towards.
That's interesting. Because we've seen the same trend in other markets as well, and I think it's something that's going on. We talk about leadership training all the time, and we have different leadership symposiums and conferences and things like that. And I really see that is the direction that leadership is really going, is to get out of the the stair, in the high tower type, so to speak, and talking down to people, because now we've got all the young people coming in and the different generations, and we have a more diverse generational workforce than we've ever had. And I think that's what it's going to take now. And part of situational leadership is being able to adapt to that, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So you mentioned that you've seen these trends in Phillips 66. What about contractors? Are you seeing the same type of trend, that gap, and is it narrowing or widening in contractors that you've been working with?
Yeah, I would say the trend is pretty continuous, pretty consistent with contractors also. I think that as the owner, we are working to set that message that we don't want those like glass house, like very removed from what's going on type of organizations. We want team players, everyone's accountable, everybody's working towards the same common goal. And I think that helps set the expectation for the contractor when they're on our site, that we expect that from them. Because if they are cohesive, if they are acting as a group, then our messages go from the top down and we're much more successful.
And have you seen a lot of reception from the contractors to liking that form, that direction we're going?
Yeah, I think the contractors appreciate that because to me, it's not really like Phillips versus contract. It's not really even Phillips and contract. It's just all of us. We are all out there trying to make energy so that people can drive their cars, people can use their cell phones, people can have electricity. Like it's not who does it. It's just we need to do it. We need to not let people get hurt. We need to not have big impacts that our community are affected by. We need to be a good operator. That way we can continue to operate. And if we have that message of, like, it doesn't matter if you wear a shield or if you have the contractor, it's just we are one group working to create a product. I think you remove that trend where it's...
That stigma that when I was... In the past, when I was working with an owner group, when I was on the contractors side, we particularly called their badge had a different outlining. Their picture had a different color. It was blue, and we called it the blue force field because they were the ones that could not wear harnesses in the racks and things like that.
Right.
And so what we're seeing is that's really out now. So you'll actually see contractors will use stop work authority and stop some of the owners, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we want. We want a collective group just all trying to go in the same direction.
Right. Yeah, definitely. We preach that. Like, don't let someone that's got a shield on their FRCs tell you to do something that you know isn't right. Don't feel like you can't call that person out if they're doing something incorrectly. It's the concept. What's our goal? And just remembering our goal and not caring so much about who is doing it puts us in a lot better position.
Okay. So along those lines, what kind of innovations in training have you guys been experimenting with or been doing to foster that approach?
So Phillips, we've been doing a lot of both different approaches with training and different approaches with our leadership. So like for this turnaround that we're about to have, we brought in HASC to do a 4-hour leadership training for individuals that are going to be in leadership roles but aren't used to having that responsibility. Right. Because we recognize, it can be really hard to go from, hey, I'm a peer, I talk about what we do on the weekends, we exchange handshakes and, pat each other on the back, to I'm going to have to tell you what to do, and if you're not doing it, I'm going to have to hold you accountable for that. So in our desire to want to help them bridge that difference, we did the 4-hour step up leadership training.
Okay. Yeah, it's so hard sometimes to do that when you're moving someone up permanently, but even for turnarounds when you're moving someone up just temporarily, right? And so you're going to be in this leadership role for 3-4 months, and then you're going to go back to being a peer-to-peer with that same person that you were just leadership of. So the dynamics of that are really tricky to navigate sometimes and very difficult for people, right?
Yeah, and some of those people don't even, because there's a lot of people out there that want to stay and remain individual contributors, subject matter experts, not necessarily, directing people in their day-to-day job. Right. And some of those people don't really have a choice for a turnaround because we have a lot of jobs to fill. And so it's kind of like, okay, you've been designated as one of these roles, and it might be something that they're not super passionate about doing. They obviously want to do a good job, because everybody wants to do a good job with their work. But it's giving them tools for, how can you get yourself out of the uncomfortable zone and be comfortable in your new task for a couple months.
So you mentioned all the innovations and the new course you're taking for this turnaround coming up. Are you seeing those innovations in other trainings outside of Phillips 66? Are you seeing those as well in general industries?
So from just general training, more on like safe work practices, what those policies are, Phillips is starting to really ask and expect our contractors to take a different approach to how they're training their workforce, because oftentimes what we see is maybe like a book handed to a worker, and it's a worker that works with their hands. So the way that they learn is not
more of a tactile learner, right?
Exactly. So we see them handing those books, and then, maybe, okay, our verification of knowledge is signing a sheet of paper that says, yes, I've read and understand all of these rules and regulations, which, in decades ago, that would be a very accepted method of teaching and training people how.
That's when we didn't really want to train people. We just wanted to have record that we did, right?
It seems like that nowadays. But we're pushing them to kind of think outside the box, recognize, okay, you've got people that like they've chosen their life path is to work with their hands and to be active and to be on the tools. So think about how you train them on their material needs to match what's going to work for them. And then in that verification of knowledge, how are you truly testing that they understand and can well regurgitate what you've taught them? And we're seeing both like contractors and other Phillips sites are doing much different methods to train their workforce. It's not just the books or the death by PowerPoints. Right. It's really hands-on in the field, spending time, giving them time, to
mentoring, coaching. Yes. I think that's a growing trend as we're seeing as get on a soapbox for a minute, but there's not as many mechanical aptitude classes and things like that in your primary schools, like your high schools and things like that. And so what happens is a lot of the men and women who come to our workforce, they haven't been experienced to a lot of those. They're exposed to a lot of those things, and so they're coming in a little deficiency, and really those tactile learning styles where we actually put their hands on it and they can actually touch it and do it is very supportive of that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you and our generous sponsors. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
So in your career, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen? Is turnarounds the most difficult thing you've had to manage, or is there something else out there that has been a really difficult challenge?
The plant that I came from, we did turnarounds at least pretty much every year. So turnarounds, they're not really scary to me. I wouldn't say they're like scary, challenging. They're just a lot of work. You've got to stay focused, try to not fall into the fatigue that usually comes about when you're doing a turnaround. But I think for me, especially in this new role, I've always been very interested in trying to think outside of the box and how we form our safety programs. So, typically with safety, you're going to have your policies and procedures. You're going to have routine communications, trying to educate people on them. You're going to have training that you provide to individuals, and you'll have auditing for your workers out in the field. Right. And I guess often I question, do we just do the same thing all the time because that's what the textbooks tell us, and that's
the way we've always done it, right?
Right, exactly. I feel like the big way that we can really get safe work is by truly engaging our workforce, because people, I think I've said it quite a few times, people want to do a good job. People don't want to hurt themselves. People don't want other people to get hurt. People don't want to have a fire. They don't want to have a negative community impact. So you've got that underlining psychological, we're all aligned there. Right. So it's a matter of, okay, how do we keep them engaged so they can remember our 500 rules that they have to follow when they're out here. So that would be my ongoing biggest challenge, is how do I get people to want to follow the rules, even the little bitty rules, and how do I help them remember that enormous bucket of rules that we have.
And it's often better too, when you have that rapport with people, and you don't crucify those people who make those mistakes, right? Because mistakes are a learning point, right? There's something to learn from, and as long as you can do it safely and no one's getting hurt, and you can really take that and you really use that as a learning technique, right? Yeah. So let me ask you this: if you had a magic wand and you could wave it around and snap your fingers and say hocus pocus, and you could fix one thing, what would you want to fix in this industry?
I think it would be our safety toolbox messages that we do. So I didn't grow up in an industrial environment. My dad's a chemical engineer, so he's worked in lots of refineries, lots of industrial type experiences. But my upbringing was all in dancing.
Right.
That's all I did. I did that religiously, and what I feel like is missing from those safety toolbox is passion that comes from the speaker that goes out to the workforce, so the workforce truly remembers and wants to do what they're being asked to do. When I started working here, I would see people give the, hey, be your brother's keeper, watch out for slips, trips, and falls. And it's just a very crafted,
generic.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of passion. I was super passionate about dance, and that was the most important thing to me, was having passion for what I do. And I've carried that over into this field as well. And when I walk away from a really, really good safety message, you can feel that passion from that speaker that's being driven to their workforce. And then the workforce, you see people put their phones down or move what they're doing or put their snacks aside, and they're just glued on the person that's talking, and they walk away remembering exactly what they said. Right. And I feel like if we could have that type of engagement with people on a regular basis, regardless of what we're saying, we're going to have success, because then we're all communicating those goals and those requirements and what we need to do correctly, to where then it's actually heard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think passion is one of those big things, right? Because we've all seen people who sound very robotic when they go up and they deliver, a message, whether it be safety, whether it be anything, and you can just tell. And when you're engaging someone like that, your mind does have a tendency to wander. Right. But we've all also, on the flip side of that, been listening to someone who got our attention, who for whatever reason captivated us, and we held on to every word they have, and it's you can definitely tell the difference when you have those two different speakers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and thank you for being a guest. And we will try to do this again maybe sometime. And
thanks for having me.
Now that you're in Montana and you have to deal with the cold, and that's very different cold from you.
Yes, it is.
From Oklahoma, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So I was making a joke earlier. I said, it was snowing yesterday here, and I actually said in the class, I said, "Oh my gosh, it's snowing," and everyone was looking at me like, "Yeah, so
what's the big deal?"
Yeah. In Texas, we would have shut the entire state down at that point. So.
I think my second day I read, one of our policies was at a certain temperature, which is -25 or so, that we have special requirements. And I said to someone, do we actually see that temperature? Yes, we do. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's hard to imagine, right? Growing up in, Midwest or where we're from,
Yeah.
it's hard to imagine a temperature of that magnitude.
Yeah, it's real. It's very real.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much for being our guest. I appreciate it. I hope you had a great time, and we'll do this again.
Thanks, Tommy.
All right. Remember, everybody, stay safe.
Thanks for listening to Building Safe Workplaces. Be sure to tune in next time for another exciting episode. Till then, stay safe and stay healthy.